Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Dr. Angela Palmieri, and I am very excited to be here with all of you to discuss what are the benefits of early multilingualism and how do young children learn languages. Today, I will be presenting on this topic. Thank you so much for being here to learn about early childhood multilingualism and the benefits of learning multiple languages when children are very young. And so we will be discussing how children learn languages and the benefits of learning multiple languages at a very young age. We will be answering and asking questions. It will be a conversation between myself and all of you. So please welcome, and I hope that you enjoy today's presentation. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and this will be a learning session, but also a dialogue around multilingualism. Okay, so today we will be discussing several themes. We will be talking about the definition of multilingualism, some facts about multilingualism around the world, the stages of second language acquisition, what language development looks like in young children, the benefits of multilingualism, language and the brain, theories around language development, and some misconceptions about multilingualism, especially in children. So I just want to share a little bit about myself, my own multilingual journey. So my parents are both from Abruzzo, Italy. So I am Italian. They are from a small part of Italy called Abruzzo, and they immigrated, both of them, to Venezuela at different points in their lives. My mom when she was very young, my father when he was in his 30s, and both of them spoke Italian and dialects of their towns. Both of them spoke Spanish and English. My mother only spoke to me in Spanish throughout my life, and my father spoke to me only in Italian throughout my life. Um, which very interesting way to become multilingual, right? So both of them only spoke to me in Italian until I was about 5 years old. I was born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela, and I immigrated to Los Angeles, California, in the United States when I was 7 years old. So by the time I started learning English when I was 7, I was already literate in Spanish and in Italian. And so that helped create a multilingual person, right? I speak English, Spanish, and Italian fluently. So that's a little bit about my story. I'm just going to always be checking if there's anything in the chat for me. That's why sometimes I'll be going back and forth. That's a little bit about my story, and that is a very important part of this presentation because it really is the foundation of why I love this topic so much and why I became a researcher and scholar on and in multilingual and bilingual education. And so now I want to learn a little bit about you. What languages are spoken in your home, in your family, and in your community? So feel free, go ahead and write in the chat what languages are spoken in your home, in your family, and in your community. There should be a little chat box where you can add those responses. And the moderator will also be giving me some of those responses as well through the chat. I'll just give you some moments to do that. What languages are spoken? Yes. Okay. Okay, there's a 1 minute lag. Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, so I'll be checking the chat to see um, essentially what languages are represented here today. The lecture will last approximately 50 minutes, if maybe a little shorter, okay, depending on how long we take. Okay, all right, I'll be moving on here. Okay, so what does it mean to be multilingual? So there's many definitions of multilingualism, but here are some uh, parts of that definition. So the ability to use more than one language for a variety of purposes and at different levels of proficiency, right? So being able to communicate in more than one language, and the ability of an individual speaker or a community of speakers to communicate in three or more languages, right? So a multilingual person, there's many definitions, right? We have two or more languages, three or more languages. What would you add? What would you add to that definition? So here in the chat, I see we have Russian, English, some Arabic. We have Italian as well. Russian, English, Italian. Russian, Tatar. Yep, English. Okay. Kalmyk, Russian. Wonderful. Okay. So what else would you add to the definition of multilingualism? What else would you add? So here we have some comments that someone is Russian, their husband is Italian, we speak English at home. So we would love our future kids to speak all of these languages. We have Korean as well. Wonderful. We speak Russian, we speak Spanish from Argentina. Nice. Okay, Russian, French, and Spanish, Russian and English. We have a lot of languages in this community. Beautiful. Okay, so many of you are multilingual, right? And your homes are multilingual. And so sometimes people think that if you have to be completely proficient to be multilingual, but we have different proficiency levels in the different languages that we speak. Okay, I am much more advanced in English and have more proficiency in English than I do in Italian because I live in the United States. So, but I am fluent in Italian as well. And so in this presentation, the word multilingual and bilingual, I'm going to be using them synonymously and interchangeably, okay? So multilingual, bilingual, we'll be using them similarly. And so there are many types of multilingual homes. I'm just checking the chat here. Okay. Oh, we have some people even speaking Mongolian. I have been to Mongolia. Beautiful. Buryat. Yes. Mongolia is a beautiful country. Okay. So there's many types of multilingual homes, right? There's homes where the parents speak different languages, and there's homes where children go to school in one language and the parents speak another language. We have homes where grandparents speak a language, a third language, a dialect, or an indigenous language, right? We have children learning another language in school. Sometimes families learn languages for fun or as a hobby, right? So many of you already mentioned the types of homes that you are raising your children in, right? You speak some languages, your children are learning another. And so it's important to understand the way multilingualism works if we do raise our children in multilingual homes. Okay. So there's many ways to become a multilingual person. We become multilingual in the home, through our grandparents and other family members in schools, through bilingual programs, through world language programs at the university, traveling, technology, right? I have a friend studying Korean through Duolingo, right? Through our friends, we become multilingual. I'm just checking here. Yes, so someone wrote in the chat that multilingualism is not only speaking languages, but also the sharing of cultures. Absolutely. Someone else wrote here the ability not only to speak many languages, but to understand the cultures of those languages. Absolutely. That is a fundamental part of learning a language, the culture. I'll be talking about that as well in a little while. Okay, and so there's 6 types of bilingualism or multilingualism, right? So um, I want you to think, what type of bilingual person are you? So a semilingual person is somebody who is not strong in either language. A passive bilingual person is a person who is a native speaker in one language and is able to understand but not speak another language. Okay, so that's very common. Sometimes we understand the language, we cannot speak the language. A compound or dominant bilingual is someone who is proficient in both of the languages. Okay, excuse me, who is more proficient in one of the two languages, and usually that is the case, right? It's very rare for you to be proficient in both languages equally. One is usually more dominant. We have a coordinate bilingual. So this is where we have two parallel linguistic systems. When two parents have different mother tongues, and each parent only speaks his or her mother tongue to the child, kind of like what happened to me, right? And so when one parent speaks one language and another parent speaks another, the child constructs two separate linguistic systems in the brain and can handle them easily. A balanced bilingual is one who is more or less equally proficient in both languages, but may not pass as a native speaker in both languages, right? And then we have an ambilingual or equilingual, and that is a person who passes in any situation in both languages as a native speaker. Okay? And so I really want you to determine, what type of bilingual are you? What type of bilingual are you? And you could go ahead and share that in the chat. Okay? What type of bilingual person are you? I'll just leave this up for just a little while, since I know it's a little bit complex. Okay? And I'll be reading those off in the chat in just a moment. So just some interesting facts about multilingualism around the world. There are 7,168 languages spoken by people around the world, and most languages are disappearing. Okay, languages are living, they are dynamic, they change, right? They're used by communities whose lives are rapidly changing in our world, and approximately 40% of those languages are endangered, with fewer than 1,000 users remaining as speakers of those languages. And just 23 languages really account for more than half of the world's population of languages, right? So 90% of the world's languages are spoken by less than 100,000 people. That's incredible. That means we need to preserve those languages. And there are 46 languages that only have one single speaker left. Okay, languages are very important. All right, so we have some answers, right? Some people saying they're balanced bilinguals. Please reflect on that. Go ahead and share that if you would like. Okay, in Asia, we have the most languages spoken. That's 2,294 languages. In Africa, 2,144. The Americas, 1,061. Pacific, 1,313. And in Europe, 287 languages spoken in those continents. Okay. And this is a list of the world's most multilingual countries. Very interesting, right? Because we have Papua New Guinea that has many indigenous languages. A lot of countries around the world have hundreds of indigenous languages spoken. Those are very much endangered languages. Okay. And the world's most spoken languages are Chinese, Spanish, English, Hindi, Arabic, Bengali, Portuguese, Russian, Japanese, and Landa. So those are the world's most spoken languages. Okay. Okay, so just out of curiosity here, if you could learn any language, what language would you learn? If you could learn any language, what language would you just choose to learn for fun, right? All right, we have a lot of answers coming in the chat. Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. All right, we have a lot of compound bilinguals, right? Balanced bilinguals. Okay. Thank you, moderator. I read that. Yeah, dominant bilinguals, right? Okay. We have one person who is an ambi-bilingual. That's very rare, right? To be a native speaker in multiple languages. So now, just if you could learn any language, what would you choose to learn? I think for me, I am fascinated by indigenous languages. I did live in New Zealand for a while, and they speak Te Reo Maori. Te Reo Maori is an indigenous language, the indigenous language, native language of New Zealand. So I'll move forward, but go ahead and feel free whenever you have time to share in the chat what language you would learn if you could. Okay. All right. So now we are going to discuss essentially what type of bilingual are you in terms of when you learned the languages that you speak. Okay. So there are several types of bilingual people. Okay. The first one is a sequential bilingual. So a sequential bilingual is somebody like me, right? Italian was my first language. Then I learned Spanish after I was 4 or 5 years old. Then I learned English. So first Italian, then Spanish, many years later, then English, right? So you first learn one language, and then you really understand that language. And then after the age of 3, you will learn another language, right? And so that means that your degree of fluency in that language will differ. It depends on how much exposure you have to those languages. And sometimes we call those bilinguals second language learners. Okay, so are you a sequential bilingual? Let's see. Then we have simultaneous bilingual. Okay, someone who learns 2 or more languages between 0 to 3 years old at the same time. Okay, so you're learning them at the same time. You are essentially proficient in both pretty equally because you're learning them at the same time. One may become more dominant over time, right? And you will establish 2 separate language systems at the same time. This is very interesting. Okay, when you learn, that's when one parent speaks to you in one language, another parent in another. You develop 2 separate language systems, but one may become more dominant usually. Okay, just checking to see if there are answers in the chat here. Ooh, somebody wrote, right? Chinese, Arabic, Cantonese, Japanese, absolutely. Japanese is a beautiful language. Okay, Spanish, Arabic, beautiful. Okay. Yes, Italian, Kalmyk, Norwegian. Okay, Korean. We have many people wanting to learn the same languages, right? Irish, Gaelic, Spanish, of course. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so I have a video here, a very short video that talks about why being bilingual is good for the brain. It's very short, and I hope that you enjoy it. I think
It used to be thought that being bilingual was a bad thing, that it would confuse or hold people back, especially children. Turns out we couldn't have been more wrong.
Learning new languages is an exercise of the mind, equivalent of going to a gym every day. In the bilingual brain, all our languages are active, all at the same time. The continual effort of suppressing a language when speaking another, along with the mental challenge that comes with regularly switching between languages, exercises our brain. It improves our concentration, problem solving, memory, and in turn, our creativity.
It's now widely accepted that there are huge benefits to being bilingual. A key breakthrough came back in 2007 in Toronto, when Ellen Bialystok and her team made a discovery that shook the scientific community and has massive real-world implications.
It was the first study which suggested that bilingual people who speak more than one language, develop dementia 4 to 4.5 years later than those who don't. It was a powerful confirmation of the idea of cognitive reserve.
Now, what is cognitive reserve? Cognitive reserve is the idea that people develop a reserve of thinking abilities, and this protects them against losses that can occur through aging and disease. As well as delaying the onset of dementia, bilingual people have been shown to recover significantly better after a stroke. Learning anything new helps build cognitive reserve, but there's something special about language.
Language is particularly broad and complex. It affects ideas and concepts, perception, different sounds. The more complex a certain skill is, the more likely it is to have a positive effect on cognitive reserve.
So when is the best time to learn a new language? Well, here's part of the answer.
The brain is a complex set of neural networks. When you're learning a new language as a child, you're building new networks. But when you learn a language later in life, you have to modify the existing networks and make more connections. Because learning languages later in life can be more challenging, the benefits can also be greater.
But a 2023 study at Great Ormond Street suggests this is just part of the story.
So we invited 3 groups of children that were aged 8 to 10. And we had a group of children who were monolinguals, a group of children who had early exposure to Greek and English from birth. They were our early bilinguals. And finally, we had a group who had been exposed to English between the ages of 2 and 5, and they were our later bilinguals. So what we did that no one had done before is that we asked the children to lie in the scanner while doing nothing and just staring out across. And during this, we measured their brain activity. So what we found that was really exciting for us is that our early bilingual group had the strongest connectivity in the network at rest. And this group of regions are regions that light up when we're doing nothing and just mind wandering. A little bit like if you're going to the gym every day, your muscles might look bigger at rest. Well, similarly, your brain might be better connected at rest because you are learning a language early. And this is something no one had found before.
And there's more.
One lesser-known behavioral effect of bilingualism in both children and adults is the ability to see the other people's perspective, or to understand that it is possible to have different points of view.
Recent studies have also found that people tend to react more emotionally in their first language and more rationally in a more abstract way in the second. And the way it is usually explained is that the first language is the one which we use to speak with family, with friends, in informal settings. The second language is usually learned at school, at the university, at work.
Scientists are discovering new upsides to being bilingual all the time. And it's not just our brains that benefit.
Learning new languages and speaking more than one language is very important not only for individuals, but also for societies.
Learning new languages can open doors to new cultural experiences, life opportunities.
Different people, different communities, and different ways of seeing the world.
And with that, we'll say a final
Ma'assalama.
再见.
Au revoir, arrivederci.
Goodbye, do widzenia, auf Wiedersehen, adios, adeus.
Bye.
Hwyl fawr.
Okay. Yes, that's a wonderful video that shows essentially the complexities of the bilingual brain and why being bilingual is so beneficial. I'm a huge advocate of essentially fostering bilingualism and multilingualism in our children. Okay. And so, and in adults as well. It's never too late to learn another language. And so this is a very important question that I have for you now. What is the best age for someone to learn another language? So I want you to write in the chat, at what age did you learn another language? And what age do you think is the best age to learn another language? Right? So my first language was Italian until I was 5. Then I learned Spanish and I continued learning Spanish. I teach in Spanish and then I learned English, all before the age of 7 years old, right? By the time I was 7, those are the languages I spoke. And so I really would like to know, what age do you think is the best age? So I'll be reading those in the chat. I'll proceed here. So I will be sharing some research with you on early childhood multilingualism. And the source for this is the article that you see here on the screen. And so it'll surprise you what age is the best age to learn another language. Okay, so a question is, what are the drawbacks of multilingualism, if any? I'll answer, in my opinion, there are no drawbacks of multilingualism, but I'll answer that a little bit more thoroughly in a moment. Okay. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit how children learn language, okay? And so first of all, babies essentially start distinguishing sounds. So when a child is born, they can actually hear and distinguish all the sounds of all the languages in the world. Okay, that's 150 sounds, 7,100 languages. But they're not using all those sounds, okay? They're not using, right, all of those sounds because they usually are speaking just a few languages in their home. And so they can actually respond to the rhythm of a language. They can recognize the stress, the pace of the language. And essentially, even as early as 4 months, they can distinguish between sounds and other noises like a word and a clap. But family, by the time they are 1 year old, they will drop all the sounds that aren't part of the language they are learning. So can you imagine if we expose children to multiple languages, even when they're babies? Because by the time they're 1, they already drop anything that doesn't belong to their own language, right? And so I think that's very interesting. So that's kind of the first stage. Then we get to the second stage, right? The second stage is they start learning words, right? They start learning words in a language, and they put those words together to make meaning. And this is a very important step because if you think about it, when we're speaking, all we're doing is making sounds. For a child to start understanding, oh, wait, those sounds are words. They make words and they make sentences, right? And so, in order for a child to understand that, they have to understand when one word ends and another begins, and that's called word boundaries. Okay? I'm just checking the chat here. Some people say the earlier the better. The best age to learn a language is 4 to 5, right? Started learning English at 5, Chinese at 16, Italian at 20, Spanish at 28. Okay. So some of you started learning other languages even as adults. Okay, beautiful. So it's definitely never too late. Somebody even said they're learning Hebrew at 61 years old. That's amazing. Okay, I'm going to give you some research that will definitely shock you in terms of when the best age is, in terms of the best time to soak in those languages. Okay, at 8 months, they can recognize groups of sounds, right? And essentially distinguish word boundaries. 12 months, they're able to attach meaning to words. And 18 months, they start communicating, right? They start understanding the words that they're learning, essentially. So this is where they start saying their first words, and they're starting to differentiate between nouns and verbs. And that's why most of the time, the first word of a child is a noun, right? Like mom, right? Milk, those are nouns in a language, right? And then they start learning sentences, and they start creating sentences using the correct word order. And what's fascinating is even at this age, they start using grammatically correct sentence order. So it's so interesting. I mean, even when they're 2 years old, there's, that grammatical correctness is starting to develop. Okay. And so at 24 months, right, they start creating simple sentences. They might say like, me cookie, right? instead of may I have a cookie, for example. By 30 to 36 months, 90% of what children say is grammatically correct. And essentially, after 3 years old, they start expanding their vocabulary and developing more complex language. Okay. But essentially, at the age of 12, okay, at the age of 12, all the architecture to learn a language is complete. So the windows of all of that development, of all of that language exposure and learning, the windows, we say they close, right? And the fundamental architecture in the brain for language is complete. Of course, that does not mean that you can't learn another language after 12. It just means that the best time is before the age of 12, okay? They have the foundations to learn a language like a sponge. Okay. Very interesting, right? Yes. Very interesting. Before the age of 12. And so this is called the critical period of learning a language. And although there is a lot of debate, some people say it's between 2 and 13 years old, right? There's a lot of debate around the critical period when it comes to second language acquisition, but essentially it is before the age of 12 years old. Okay. And that's called the critical period hypothesis. That says that language learning, the capacity to learn another language, declines after 12 years old. And it becomes much more difficult and effortful. You can still learn it. I have a friend who learned German when he was 25 years old and he became extremely fluent. He had to go live in Germany for 5 years, right? It's not as simple as when you're an adult. Okay, so it shows here, you can see the critical period for language learning declining. You could see here at the age of 12, how when you're very, very young, the language ability, it scores very high and then it declines shortly thereafter. Okay. And the language lives in the left side of your brain. Okay, that's the side that deals with speech and language production. So it lives in the left side. There's different parts of the brain that affect language, and that this is just just to learn what parts of the brain essentially have to do with language. And we have Broca's area, Wernicke's area, the motor cortex, and the auditory cortex. And essentially, these are the areas that have to do with speech production, motor, your speech and motor processes, okay? How to create sounds, right? And the vocalization of sounds, and how to receive signals, right? And in order to create language. Okay, so now I'm just checking the chat here. Yeah, 12. Yes, I know people were shocked. Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, somebody wrote, I would say there aren't any limitations on age frames. All ages have their advantages and it's easier in childhood. Yes, I mean, when you're an adult, you know how to learn, right? You are able to learn a language in your way. But in terms of the way the brain works, and even after a certain age, you have an accent when you learn a language in many cases. Before a certain age, you don't, right? They say before puberty, before you reach, when you're becoming an adult, you are actually able to learn a language without developing an accent. After that, essentially, that doesn't occur as easily. Okay. All right. So now I want to address the question of, are there any negatives to learning and becoming multilingual? Again, for me, there are no negatives. I think becoming a multilingual person allows you to, there's so many benefits that I'll go into now, but I think one of the most beautiful ones is that you're able to communicate with so many more people, right? Even for me, the fact that I speak Spanish, I mean, I am able to communicate with the population of 21 countries all over the world, right? I learned the cultures of those countries because I'm able to speak the language. And of course, Italian is the language of my ancestors. There's a connection to my ancestors because I speak Italian. I'll be going through the benefits in a little while. And then I just want to hear your thoughts. Do you think there's any negatives to learning a language? If so, go ahead and write them in the chat. If not, also, what are the benefits that you find in learning and becoming a multilingual person? So there are 5 benefits that I will be discussing to learning a language and becoming a multilingual person. They are education, cognitive benefits, economic, cultural, and familial. So every job I've ever had in my life, I've been able to get much more easily because I speak Spanish, because in Los Angeles, there are a lot of Spanish speakers. And so that's a huge benefit in my life. Okay, so there are a lot of brain benefits as well. The multilingual brain is constantly activated, especially the linguistic portion, even when we're not speaking or engaging in linguistic tasks. That's why being a multilingual person reduces the risk of dementia and other illnesses. I'll be going through that in a moment. Right. So, in terms of the cognitive benefits of being multilingual, we have the executive functions of the brain, right? That is your ability to switch your attention between things and exercise your working memory, right? That is greatly enhanced. You have increased intellectual flexibility, intellectual cognitive ability, and problem solving skills, a more perceptive understanding of the world, and of course, you are protected against the decline of executive control in aging. And that's been very well documented. Okay, let me see if there's any comments here. Yes. Okay. I'll be going through those. Yeah. So some people have written that perhaps one negative in learning a language is that you may mix up the languages, right? And I think it's normal to sometimes mix up some languages, but I wouldn't say it's exactly a negative. It's normal for your brain to especially if the languages are similar. That happens especially in the beginning of learning a language. After that, your brain has the ability to differentiate between the languages. Okay, all right. Okay, let's keep going. Educational benefits, right? We have so important that when you learn one language, it's much easier to learn others, right? So I speak 3. Theoretically, I should learn French. I should, especially because I speak the Romance languages, right? I should learn Portuguese also, perhaps. Also other languages, right, that have a different alphabet system that are much more complex. My brain is able to learn those more easily. I should take advantage of that. I never have tried, to be honest, but I should. Um, it promotes higher levels of abstract thought and reasoning, increased levels of creativity, improve learning outcomes in various subjects. Then we have economic benefits, right? We're able to find many more jobs than when we are monolingual, right? I mean, every job in the world, I think, is benefited from knowing multiple languages. And it raises your occupational status and earning potential. There's greater business opportunities, greater job opportunities, higher salaries, better communication in the workplace because you're able to communicate with different people, possibility of job mobility. Then, of course, we have sociocultural benefits. I mean, we are able to understand different cultures, and that increases empathy and love for other people, right? That enhances connections to the heritage part of yourself, right? When I speak Italian, my ancestors are from Abruzzo, Italy, hundreds of years back. And I feel that I can go to Italy, I can go to Abruzzo, and I can speak Italian and the dialects of my parents, and I feel a connection to my heritage. I am more globally aware, right? When we speak multiple languages, that reduces bias and discrimination against other people. You have more empathy towards others. It increases your self-esteem, and it improves cross-group relationships, excuse me. And of course, the familial. When you lose the language of your family, you can't speak to the elders in your family. You lose the connection between your family and culture and the language. You are able to keep your native language, and you allow communication between your family members. So many times, especially in the United States, you have grandparents who can't speak to your grandchildren, to the grandchildren, because they don't speak the same language anymore. That is devastating to families. Okay, and so keeping that language is fundamental to keeping the relationships in between family members. Okay, I just want to see what we are saying in the comments here. Yeah, so we have, I speak German with an English accent, however my native language is Russian, right? Okay, yes. Beautiful. I have 5 daughters. All of them speak English, French, Russian. I adore learning different languages. Beautiful. Yes. Somebody wrote, I like it. I am globally aware. Absolutely. Okay. And so you've been writing, what are the other benefits of being multilingual? If you want to share more of your thoughts, right? What are other benefits? Yeah, the world is open for multilinguals. Absolutely. The world is open. The world is yours when you are able to speak multiple languages. I mean, what else? You become a global citizen, and that is a beautiful thing. Okay. So there are many, many benefits of being a multilingual person, and that is the best gift we can give our children. It really is. Okay. Before we finish, I just want to share with you 2 theories in second language acquisition. We used to believe that languages developed separately, that if you taught one language, that it would confuse the other language, or, oh, don't speak to your child in this language because it's going to confuse them. That is not correct. What is correct is that our languages live in our linguistic system, and we use them. They come out in different channels, right? But we use them to make meaning of the world. So one language does not live in one part of the brain and the other language in another part of the brain, and that's not correct. Okay, we used to believe that, but now we understand that our languages form part of our linguistic system, and we use them to make meaning of our world in all occasions. And this is the representation of that here. When I was growing up in Venezuela, the teachers would tell my mom, don't speak to Angela in Italian because she's going to get confused. Luckily, my father said, absolutely not. She will not lose her Italian. Can you imagine if my father would have stopped speaking to me in Italian? What a great loss that would have been, right? That would have been terrible. Yes, so somebody is writing here, it's an opportunity to see the world from a different angle. We have friends from all over the world. It raises your self-esteem. You can live in other countries. You can work in other countries. I mean, it is the biggest gift. And so going back to the question that was asked, what are some negatives, right? The parts of us that want to believe that there are negatives come from misconceptions about multilingualism. Okay, so sometimes we have been taught these misconceptions which are incorrect. So, for example, learning more than one language at a young age can confuse a child. No. In the beginning, they might have some, sometimes they might mix up the languages, but eventually that does not occur anymore. Sometimes we've been told, oh, if you speak more than one language, that's going to affect your academic achievement in a negative way in school. No, It actually makes you more intelligent. Sometimes we've been taught that children are unable to distinguish between languages and that they have no control over word choice. That's not correct, right? We have linguistic systems that are developed for each language, right? And then they form a part of our brain. They live concurrently as a part of our brains. But we can distinguish between languages actually at a very young age, right? Have you ever seen a young child? If you speak to your child in one language and somebody else speaks to them in another, your child will actually change language to speak to that person because they will believe that person doesn't understand me if I speak to them in this language. It is fascinating, right? And so sometimes we believe that you should only develop literacy in one language first. That's also incorrect. You can learn how to read in multiple languages at the same time. We only learn how to read once in our life. We learn how to read, and then we use that knowledge to read in other languages. Of course, you have to learn the sounds, you have to learn the alphabet of those languages, of course, but it does not affect literacy development in a negative way. Sometimes we believe that multilingualism causes language delays. Not true, right? You can see a little bit in the beginning where a child is learning more than one language. Of course, they are learning multiple languages. Their brains are adapting to that. Slowly, that will benefit them. It will not be a hindrance to them. So, what are some other misconceptions that you've learned about learning a language? What are some other things that you've learned that are misconceptions about learning a language? Okay. Yes. Beautiful. I love how somebody wrote the privilege is to be a multilingual person. Absolutely. Okay. So as you think about any misconceptions you may have learned, I also want you to think about what significance does multilingualism have in your life? I really want you to reflect on what does it mean for you to be multilingual and for your children to become multilingual? It is the biggest gift you can ever give them. I can promise you that. I was a teacher for 20, this is my 24th year as a teacher, and I've taught languages my entire career. And what does it mean for you to be a multilingual person? As you're writing that in the chat, okay? Yep, beautiful. Languages in my brain make up a friendly and beautiful mixture and they help each other. Absolutely, absolutely. Beautiful. Okay. What questions do you have for me? And simultaneously, well, I'll actually wait to see what questions do you have for me before I continue. Yes. The last one is a hit. My children are bilingual, and I heard a lot of that. Yes, yes. Yeah, in terms of, yeah, happiness, beautiful. What questions do you have for me? Okay. I'll wait a little while to see if there's any questions, but in the meantime, everyone, I want to invite you. We have another webinar next week with Amanda Fox. She is a principal of an Italian immersion school in San Francisco in the United States. She's my colleague. So another beautiful webinar with her. So I would like to invite you to that webinar. And then I would like to inform you that you are able to receive and earn an e-certificate from the Regional Language Office if you attend all 4 of these sessions. So in the chat, the moderator will place a document where you can essentially put your attendance. And after all of the webinars, you are able to receive an e-certificate that you have essentially earned credit for taking these courses, okay? Yeah, so please make sure you fill that form out, okay? The moderator will be placing that in the chat, okay? Yes, somebody wrote, okay, that's a very important question. Somebody wrote any websites that are useful. At the end of this webinar, you will receive a 1 to 2 page summary that has resources and books and websites. However, you can email me. You can email me at, there's my email address, there's my X account as well. And so please feel free to email me if you need any resources. I can provide those for you. So yes, please feel free to email me and I'll help you. I'll give you anything that you need. Okay, but you will be provided with a summary, so do not worry. You will definitely receive that. And don't forget to fill out the attendance form, okay? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Somebody said I look like my mom. Thank you. A question is, should mother speak only one language and father the other? If you're able to sustain that in your family, that is the best way to become a multilingual person. One person in the family speaks one language, the other speaks another language, and that is how you create a multilingual person. There's a lot of research on trilingualism that shows that's how we develop trilingualism in children. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure. Here is my contact information again, and I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.